I still remember the sound of the champagne glasses clinking together that night. It was supposed to be my birthday. The penthouse glittered with candles, and the city stretched out like a living jewel beneath the glass walls. People laughed, posed for pictures, toasted to me, though most of them were really toasting to themselves. I should have felt celebrated. Instead, I felt cornered. Alex waited until the music softened. They set a leather folder on the marble table right next to the cake and smiled like a magician about to reveal a trick. The room went quiet. I looked down at the folder, the notary stamp visible in the corner of the first page. Alex tapped it once with manicured fingers and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Half of your $2 million penthouse is mine. You cannot even afford a real lawyer." My breath caught in my chest. I tightened my grip around the golden key. I had been holding a silly habit of mine, keeping the house key in my pocket like a lucky charm. Guests shifted awkwardly, pretending to sip their drinks. The insult hung in the air, heavier than the smoke from the birthday candles. That was the shock. The humiliation came quickly after. Alex had chosen the moment with precision, my birthday, in front of family and colleagues, just when the dessert was being served. Laughter had filled the room seconds before, but now it was replaced with whispers, sideways glances, and the cruel satisfaction on Alex's face. I forced a smile, the kind you give when you want to disappear, but cannot afford to. My voice stayed calm, though my chest burned. "Thank you for the gift," I said. I even raised my glass. Pretending, always pretending. That is how you survive, when the person who once swore to love you becomes the executioner. In that instant, I felt both invisible and exposed. The penthouse was filled with people, yet I had never felt more alone. No one defended me. Not one hand touched my shoulder. They all preferred to watch, as if betrayal were some sort of entertainment. But what they did not know, what Alex certainly did not know, was that this performance would not be the finale. It was only the overture. Tell me where you are watching from, and hit subscribe. We need to talk about betrayal and money. That night, after the guests left, I sat at the long oak dining table in silence. The candles had melted down to small puddles of wax. The key was still in my hand, warm now, the ridges pressed into my skin. I thought about what Alex had said. I thought about the folder. And I thought about the truth Alex believed, that I had no one to fight for me. For days I replayed the words over and over. You cannot even afford a real lawyer. It was cruel, but not entirely wrong. My savings would not survive a drawn-out legal war. Alex knew it. They were counting on it. That folder was more than a threat. It was a declaration of victory before the first shot had been fired. I walked through the penthouse, each room heavy with memories. The leather couch where we once fell asleep watching late-night movies, the balcony where Alex once promised me forever, the study lined with books, many of which I had carried from my grandfather's old estate. That penthouse was not just real estate. It was history inheritance proof that I had once mattered to someone. And now it was under siege. I tried to breathe, tried to think. What options did I have? Sell quickly and run surrender and sign whatever Alex demanded. That was the script. Alex wanted me to follow the silent exit of the defeated. But in the quiet of the penthouse, another thought whispered through me. It had been 7 years since I had spoken to Evelyn, my sister, my enemy, and inconveniently, the most feared divorce attorney in the state. I will tell you about her later. She deserves her own introduction. For now, all you need to know is that Alex believed Evelyn was gone from my life for good. Alex thought they had cornered me, that money and power were on their side, that I was a simple manager with no claws. They were wrong. The official papers arrived 3 days later. They came in a thick white envelope with my name typed in sharp black letters across the front. The courier handed it to me like it was nothing, just another delivery. But I knew the weight of it before I even tore the seal open. Inside was a neatly printed list of demands. Alex did not just want half the penthouse. No, that would have been too simple, too merciful. They wanted 70% of our savings spousal support for a minimum of 5 years, and control of certain investments that my grandfather had left in a trust. It was not a negotiation, it was a declaration of surrender. At the bottom, written in Alex's tidy signature, were the words, "These terms are final. Fighting them will only make it worse for you." I read it twice, then set the folder down on the marble counter. I stared at it the way one might stare at a weapon, cold, dangerous, meant to harm. Later that evening, Alex called. Their voice was smooth, confident, rehearsed. "You might as well sign Olivia. Let's be realistic. You're a glorified employee. You don't own a company. You don't have hidden millions tucked away. You're not built for a fight. I have the lawyers, I have the connections, and I will bury you in fees before you even step into a courtroom." The words were daggers, each one carefully aimed. I said nothing at first. Silence has a way of unnerving the arrogant, but Alex kept talking, filling the quiet with poison. I finally asked why. Why not just leave? Why take everything? There was a pause. Then came the laugh, short, bitter, cruel. Because weakness should not be rewarded. You're too sentimental. You cling to houses, to memories, to things that do not pay dividends. I deserve better. I hung up before my anger could spill out. My hands were trembling. My mind was racing. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shatter the glass walls of that penthouse. Instead, I sat alone at the dining table, the envelope between us like a third presence. The days that followed blurred together. I went to work, smiled at colleagues, nodded during meetings, but inside I was sinking. At night, I walked the silent rooms of the penthouse, each shadow reminding me of what I stood to lose. Then came the twist, the moment that turned humiliation into fury. A friend from work sent me a screenshot. It was from a social media post that Alex had made at some late-night party. In the photo, Alex stood with a glass of wine, grinning, surrounded by people I did not recognize. The caption read, "Soon I'll own a $2 million view. Some people are too easy to outsmart." The comments beneath were filled with laughing emojis and congratulations. My name was not mentioned, but it did not have to be. Everyone knew whose penthouse Alex was talking about. I stared at that screenshot until my eyes blurred. My chest felt like it might explode. Betrayal is one thing when it happens in private. It is another thing entirely when it becomes entertainment for strangers. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the study with the lights off, scrolling through the comments, each one cutting deeper. At 3 in the morning, I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a stack of old letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Letters from Evelyn written years ago, before our falling out. We had not spoken since the argument over our grandfather's estate. I had wanted to preserve the old family house to keep it as a memory. Evelyn, ever the pragmatist, had wanted to sell it and divide the money. Harsh words were exchanged. Pride built walls. 7 years of silence followed. But as I sat there humiliated and furious, I thought of her again. My sister, the legal predator whose name made opponents fold before the first hearing, the one person Alex was certain I could never call. I traced the edges of the letters with my fingers. Could I swallow my pride? Could I risk hearing her voice? Risk being rejected? The memory of Alex's words answered for me. You cannot even afford a real lawyer. Maybe I could not, but I could afford to dial a number. That night, with my hands shaking, I searched for Evelyn's private contact information. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. I felt the faint, sharp edge of defiance. But I will tell you what happened with that call later. That part matters. The week after Alex's demands felt like a descent into some private underworld. I woke each morning in the penthouse with the sun spilling across the skyline, but instead of feeling grateful for the view, I felt trapped by it. Every window became a reminder of what I was about to lose. I tried to function as if life were normal. I went to the office, wore pressed suits, spoke in calm tones. But inside I was unraveling. The folder of divorce terms sat on my kitchen counter like a vulture waiting, daring me to look at it again. Each time I passed it, my stomach knotted. It wasn't just the money. Though losing 70% of our savings, the penthouse and a promise of spousal support would have gutted me. It was the way Alex had framed it, as if I was an obstacle to be swept aside. As if my years of work, my loyalty, my sacrifices all meant nothing. I thought about our early years together when we shared an apartment so small, we had to take turns moving around the kitchen. Back then, Alex used to laugh at our poverty and promise that one day we'd live above the clouds. I believed them. I believed every word. Now those words felt like poison in my memory. The humiliation grew sharper when another message found its way to me. This time it wasn't a social post, it was an email. One of Alex's lawyers had forwarded documents to the wrong address. By sheer accident, I was copied. I opened the thread with trembling hands. There, written in clinical legal language, was Alex's strategy. She is too sentimental to endure prolonged litigation. We will drown her in fees until she signs. Focus pressure on the penthouse. It is her emotional weak point. I read the line again. Too sentimental. That was Alex's calculation of me. Not weak, not foolish, but sentimental, as though caring about family, about memories, about a home were crimes to be punished. For the first time since the birthday party, anger began to harden inside me. It was no longer just humiliation. It was no longer grief. It was rage controlled but dangerous, the kind that sharpens rather than scatters. Still, there were nights I doubted myself. I would walk the halls of the penthouse in silence, touching the edges of framed photographs, the spines of books, the cool marble countertop that my grandfather had insisted on when the place was first designed. The thought of losing it all suffocated me. I was sinking and no one knew. My friends asked questions, of course. Why had I missed dinner? Why did I look so tired? I told them half-truths. Work is heavy. I'm just under pressure. I couldn't admit the real story. There was shame in it. Shame that I, the one who always looked composed, was now the target of a public betrayal. But beneath that shame, the seed of defiance was growing. Alex thought they had cornered me. They thought I was alone. They thought Evelyn was a ghost from my past. It had been 7 years since I last saw her. The fight had been ugly, the kind that splits siblings down the bone. She had wanted the family estate liquidated. I had wanted to keep it as a sanctuary. Harsh words flew selfish, impractical, heartless. Neither of us backed down. When the papers were signed and the money divided, so was the bond between us. For years I told myself I didn't need her. I told myself I was better off building my own life without her sharp tongue and colder logic. And perhaps I believed it until Alex's voice echoed in my ear again. You cannot even afford a real lawyer. The phrase haunted me. I whispered it under my breath while making coffee. I heard it when the elevator doors closed. I even muttered it once while brushing my teeth. It wasn't just Alex's insult anymore. It had become a drumbeat daring me to fight. One evening, unable to bear the silence, I took out the old letters Evelyn had written before our fallout. They smelled faintly of dust and lavender. Her handwriting was sharp, confident, uncompromising, just like her. She had always been the older sister who knew exactly how to win an argument, whether in the kitchen or the courtroom. I sat there for hours, the letters spread out on the table like relics of another life. By midnight, I knew what I had to do. I found her private number through a contact of someone who owed me a favor. My hands shook as I typed it into my phone. My thumb hovered above the call button. I could almost hear her voice already. Cold, dismissive, maybe even angry. But then I remembered Alex's smirk at my birthday. I remembered the laughter of strangers under that social media post. I remembered the email, the line about drowning me in fees. I pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. I was about to hang up when the line clicked open. A voice answered, deep and familiar. Hello. My own voice cracked when I spoke. Evelyn, it's me. I'll tell you what she said later. That part matters. For a long moment after I spoke her name, there was silence on the other end of the line. I thought she might hang up. 7 years of silence is a canyon too wide to cross with just 2 words. But then I heard her draw in a breath, steady, deliberate. Olivia, she said. My name came out almost like a question, almost like an accusation. What's wrong? The tone was clipped businesslike, but there was no mistaking it. The protective steel I had once known in my sister's voice was still there. The words tumbled out of me before I could stop them. I told her about the birthday party, the folder, the humiliation. I told her about the demand for 70% of my savings, about Alex's taunts, that I was only a glorified employee, not a business owner, not worth fighting. I told her about the social media post, the email that spoke of drowning me in fees. When I finally stopped my throat raw from speaking too fast, there was another silence. And then Evelyn asked very quietly. They said, "You couldn't afford a lawyer." Yes. That single word seemed to unlock something in her. I heard her exhale sharply. Then her voice changed, cool, precise, dangerous. It was the voice I remembered from our childhood arguments, from the few times I had seen her in court before our estrangement. The voice of someone who did not just fight but won. Tell me the date of the first hearing, she said. I blinked, stunned. You'd help me. I'll decide that after I read the documents. But for now, give me the date, I told her. Next Tuesday, downtown courthouse. She wrote it down. I could hear the scratch of her pen through the phone. You'll send me everything tonight, she said. Every email, every screenshot, every piece of paper. Do not leave out anything, even if you think it's irrelevant. And Olivia, she paused, her voice softening for just a heartbeat. Do not sign a single thing. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight on my chest lighten, if only slightly. We spoke for another half hour. At one point, I tried to apologize for the fight all those years ago, but she cut me off. Not now. Later. We don't mix sentiment with strategy. That was Evelyn, unyielding, efficient, and in her own way loyal. After I hung up, I sat in the darkened study, my phone still in my hand. The city glowed outside the window, millions of lights blinking like stars. I had taken the first step. Pride had always kept me from reaching out, but humiliation had burned that pride away. What remained was something sharper resolve. The next day, I met Evelyn in person for the first time in years. We chose a quiet cafe downtown. She walked in wearing a tailored suit, hair pulled back every inch, the formidable attorney. People turned to look at her as she passed. She carried authority like a cloak. When she reached my table, she set down her briefcase and regarded me with cool eyes. You look tired, she said. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation as clinical as a doctor's diagnosis. You look exactly the same, I replied. We studied each other for a moment, two sisters separated by pride, now reunited by betrayal. Then she opened her case and pulled out a folder. I've already reviewed the papers you sent, she said. Their strategy is clear: overwhelm you with demands, bleed you with legal fees, humiliate you into surrender. It's textbook predatory divorce litigation. I nodded. That sounds like Alex. Evelyn's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. They think you're alone. That's their first mistake. Their second mistake is underestimating me. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I never told you this, but when our grandfather updated his estate documents, he made two versions. The one we argued over and another sealed and notarized. I still have it. I stared at her, speechless. Another will. Not a will, a supplementary deed. It clarifies the transfer of the penthouse, leaving no ambiguity. Alex cannot touch it. They don't even know it exists. My heart pounded. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine Alex's face when Evelyn unveiled that document. But she wasn't finished. That's not all. I've already reached out to a forensic accountant. If Alex has been siphoning money, we'll find it. And if they've posted about it publicly, which apparently they have, that will strengthen our case. I sat back, stunned by her efficiency. In less than a day, she had assembled more protection than I could have dreamed of in weeks. You came prepared, I whispered. She gave me a sharp look. Always. That's why I win. For the first time since the nightmare began, I allowed myself to hope. Alex thought they had orchestrated my downfall. They thought humiliation was enough to break me. But what they didn't know was that the sister they counted on being absent had returned, and she was armed. Next Tuesday at the downtown courthouse, Alex would discover just how wrong they were. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Light streamed through tall windows, catching on dust motes that hung in the air. It was a Tuesday morning, too bright for the storm that was about to break. I arrived early, dressed in a navy suit that felt heavier than its fabric. My hands gripped the golden key to the penthouse in my pocket, a reminder of what was at stake. I walked through the marble hallway, each step echoing, until I reached the courtroom doors. Alex was already inside. They stood with their team of attorneys, all crisp suits and leather briefcases, projecting the confidence of predators who believed the prey had already given up. When Alex saw me, they smirked, leaning toward one of their lawyers as if to share a private joke. I took a seat, my heart pounding, and waited. Moments later, the door at the back of the courtroom opened, and Evelyn entered. The atmosphere shifted instantly. She strode forward with a calm authority that silenced even the murmurs of bystanders. Dressed in black with her silver hair pulled back, she looked like a figure carved from steel. Alex's smirk faltered when Evelyn sat down beside me. Their eyes widened, recognition dawning. I almost heard their thought. Not her. Anyone but her. Good morning, Olivia, Evelyn said, arranging her papers with deliberate care. Let's make this quick. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Alex's lead attorney rose first, speaking with the easy arrogance of someone convinced of victory. He outlined Alex's claims: 70% of savings ownership of the penthouse, spousal support control of the trust. His voice filled the room like a hammer pounding nails into a coffin. When he sat down, Alex leaned back in their chair. arms folded, eyes glittering. Then Evelyn stood. She didn't waste words. Your Honor, the demands presented are not only excessive but rooted in deliberate deceit. We have evidence that the opposing party has acted in bad faith throughout this process. Allow me to demonstrate. She opened her folder and slid forward a stack of documents. At the top was the supplementary deed, our grandfather's sealed document. This deed, notarized and dated, confirms the penthouse as exclusive property of my client. There is no legal basis for the opposing party's claim to it. The judge examined it carefully, his brows lifting. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Alex shifted in their seat, whispering urgently to their lawyer. Evelyn continued, her voice like a blade. But that is only the beginning. We also present financial records showing that the opposing party siphoned funds from joint accounts to create a private reserve. These funds were hidden under a separate entity, registered without my client's knowledge. Gasps spread across the room. Evelyn handed over the forensic accountant's report, each page marked with dates, amounts, and transfers. Alex's face reddened. They gripped the edge of the table, their composure cracking. And finally, Evelyn said, pausing for effect, we submit digital evidence of the opposing party's own admissions, posts and messages in which they bragged about gaining control of my client's assets. On the courtroom screen, the social media photo appeared, the one of Alex holding a glass of wine, smiling smugly. The caption glowed like a neon sign. Soon I'll own a $2 million view. Some people are too easy to outsmart. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the judge's gavel could not have commanded such stillness. Then came the final blow. Evelyn pressed play on a short video clip captured at a private party. Alex drunk, laughing, waving a glass. I'll drain every dollar from that apartment. She'll fold before the first hearing. The words filled the courtroom like poison smoke. When the video ended, Evelyn turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is not a case of equitable division. This is a case of calculated exploitation and humiliation. My client has endured enough. The judge's eyes were hard as he looked at Alex. Do you have any response? Alex's lawyer stammered, tried to object, tried to argue technicalities, but the weight of the evidence was crushing. Alex themselves sat rigid, their face pale now, the smirk long gone. In that moment, I felt the tide turn. For weeks, I had been drowning in humiliation and despair. Now, watching Evelyn dismantle Alex's arrogance piece by piece, I felt something I hadn't dared hope for: vindication. The hearing continued, details and counter-arguments flowing back and forth. But the damage was done. Alex had revealed themselves not just to me, but to the entire court. Their mask had slipped, and what remained was ugly, greedy, and undeniable. As we left the courtroom, for a recess, reporters waiting outside swarmed forward. Microphones thrust in faces, cameras flashing. Someone shouted Olivia. How does it feel to see the evidence against Alex? Another asked Evelyn. Is this the most blatant case of financial betrayal you've handled? Alex pushed through the crowd, face-shielded lawyers scrambling to block questions. Evelyn, calm as ever, simply said, no comment, and guided me past the chaos. Inside, away from the cameras, she allowed herself the faintest smile. Round one, she said, and they're already bleeding. I nodded, still gripping the golden key in my pocket. For the first time, I felt like it might stay mine. The courthouse recess lasted only 15 minutes, but for me, it felt like an entire season of change. When Evelyn and I walked back inside, I no longer felt like prey. Alex's eyes followed us with a mixture of panic and fury, the kind of look a gambler gives when their final card turns against them. We returned to our seats. The judge called the session back to order, and the next stage began. This was no longer about Alex's demands, it was about their exposure. Evelyn stood, her papers neatly stacked. Your Honor, she began. In addition to the financial misappropriation and digital admissions already presented, we request to introduce further evidence that demonstrates a deliberate campaign of humiliation and intimidation against my client. She gestured toward the screen again. This time it wasn't a photo or a drunken video. It was a series of emails, each projected in black and white, each carrying the same mocking tone. She is too sentimental. Pressure her at public events. Break her down until she folds. Invite more people to the birthday. Humiliation works better when witnessed. Her savings are enough to squeeze, but the penthouse is where she'll crack. Each email was signed not only by Alex, but also copied to their attorneys. The courtroom gasped as the words lit up on the wall. Even the bailiff leaned forward, reading carefully. I kept my eyes down, my hands clasped tightly together. I had lived those words, felt their weight. Seeing them projected now stripped of secrecy gave me a strange kind of peace. Everyone finally knew. The judge's voice cut through the silence. Mr. and Miss Counsel for the respondent, how do you explain this? Alex's lawyers scrambled, claiming the emails were taken out of context, that they were drafts, that perhaps they had been tampered with. Evelyn let them speak until they tripped over themselves. Then she simply said, metadata included, Your Honor. Dates times original headers, all verified. The gavel struck once. Overruled. That was when Evelyn delivered the final twist. She slid one last document across the table, the sealed supplementary deed bearing our grandfather's neat signature and the official notary stamp. This, she said, firmly removes any question of ownership. The penthouse was bequeathed exclusively to my client. It cannot be divided, sold, or claimed. It is hers alone. The judge studied the document for a long time. Alex sat frozen, their face drained of color. For weeks they had strutted with arrogance, certain that victory was theirs. Now in a single morning, the walls had collapsed around them. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She leaned slightly toward the judge. We also request the court to consider sanctions against the opposing party for deliberate bad faith, including the attempt to weaponize legal fees as a form of coercion. The courtroom buzzed. Reporters scribbled furiously. One even darted out to call their editor, likely drafting a headline about the most scandalous divorce case of the year. When the judge called for another break, the hallway outside erupted with flashing cameras. A microphone nearly struck my cheek as a reporter shouted, Olivia, is it true? Your spouse tried to steal millions. Another yelled, Evelyn, are you planning to press charges? Evelyn raised her hand for quiet, her expression carved from stone. Justice will run its course, she said, and that was all. But the world outside the courthouse was less restrained. By the time we reached the car, my phone buzzed with notifications. The video clip, the social media post, the email screenshots, they were everywhere. Hashtags exploded, number penthouse scammer, number 2 million lie, number don't marry Alex. I sat in the back seat watching my spouse's reputation unravel in real time. News anchors replayed Alex's drunken brag. Bloggers dissected the emails. Financial forums discussed the attempted asset siphoning. Even strangers on Twitter posted memes comparing Alex to villains from movies. It was surreal. For weeks I had lived in silence, humiliated. Now humiliation belonged to Alex. The same public stage they had chosen for my downfall became their own undoing. At home that evening, I walked through the penthouse with a new sense of ownership. The golden key felt heavier in my palm, not with dread this time, but with relief. Evelyn joined me in the study, spreading papers across the desk. The hearing will continue, but they're already finished, she said. Their lawyers know it. The judge knows it. What happens next is just procedure. I sat across from her, watching the way she organized each file, precise and methodical. For years I had resented her coldness, her practicality. Now I saw it for what it was, armor. She had spent her life sharpening herself for moments like this. Why did you come? I asked suddenly. After everything between us, why did you help me? She paused, her eyes meeting mine. Because you're my sister, and because no one humiliates my family in public and gets away with it. I felt something break inside me then, not in pain but in release. For 7 years we had let pride separate us. Betrayal had forced us back together. Strange how life works that way. That night I sat on the balcony overlooking the city. Cars flowed below like rivers of light. Somewhere out there Alex was watching their empire of arrogance collapse. And here above it all I held the key that no one could take. The fight wasn't over yet, but the revenge had already begun. By the time the final day of hearings arrived, Alex's downfall was already in motion. The courtroom had become less of a battleground and more of a theater. Reporters filled the benches. Law students lined the back wall. Even strangers had come just to watch. Betrayal, it seemed, had become a public spectacle. Alex entered with shoulders tight-dressed in a suit that no longer carried the aura of victory. Their lawyers looked weary, as though they had already accepted the outcome. I almost pitied them. Almost. The judge wasted no time. Evidence had been reviewed, testimony heard, documents authenticated. This court finds, the judge said, voice, echoing that the penthouse valued at $2 million is the sole property of Olivia. Furthermore, given the conduct of the respondent, spousal support is denied. Additional sanctions will be considered regarding the misappropriation of joint funds. The gavel struck. Just like that, the case that had once threatened to strip me bare was over. Alex's face collapsed into something between rage and disbelief. They leaned toward their attorney, whispering furiously, but the attorney only shook his head. The law was final. The crowd outside the courthouse was even harsher. Cameras flashed like lightning. Questions were shouted over one another. Alex, did you really try to steal the penthouse? Olivia, how does it feel to win against such betrayal? Evelyn, will your sister press charges for fraud? Alex tried to push through the crowd, but someone shouted the hashtag that had gone viral. Number penthouse scammer. Laughter followed sharp and cruel. I watched as Alex's confidence shattered under the weight of public mockery. Within days, the consequences spread further. The events company that Alex had managed quietly issued a press release. Effective immediately. Alex is no longer affiliated with our organization. No explanation was given, but everyone knew why. Clients canceled contracts, sponsors withdrew support. The scandal had made Alex toxic. And then came the flood online. Articles titled "The Costliest Divorce Scam of the Year" spread across news feeds. A viral blogger broke down the entire case with screenshots of the drunken video and emails calling Alex a masterclass in arrogance undone. The comment sections were merciless. Memes compared Alex to villains from Shakespeare, others simply mocked their failed schemes. I did not revel in it the way I thought I might. Watching someone unravel, even someone who had betrayed me, carried a strange heaviness. Revenge is not pure joy. It is bittersweet edged with grief for what was lost. But still, I felt justice. The penthouse remained mine, the inheritance intact, my savings safe. Yet the true victory was something else entirely, dignity restored. Alex had tried to erase me in public. Instead, they erased themselves. One evening, about a week after the ruling, I walked through the city streets alone. Neon lights flickered, people hurried by the world, moved on. I passed a cafe window and caught a glimpse of myself in the glass. Older, perhaps, but unbroken. At home, Evelyn was waiting in the study. She had stayed longer than she needed to reviewing documents, ensuring no loose ends remained. "They'll be fine, you know," she said, not looking up from her papers. "Alex," I asked, surprised. She nodded. "People like that always land somewhere. But it won't be where they wanted." I sat across from her, the silence between us, no longer heavy. For 7 years we had been strangers, but in the ashes of betrayal we had found one another again. I thought of something she had said before. "No one humiliates my family in public and gets away with it." Strange words, perhaps. But I understood them now. She had fought not just as my lawyer, but as my sister. News continued to swirl, but I stopped reading after a while. The noise of Alex's collapse was loud, but it no longer concerned me. My life, my home, my peace, that was what mattered. And yet a part of me knew the story would not vanish so quickly. The internet has a long memory, and betrayal leaves scars not just on the betrayed, but on the betrayer. As for me, I was learning to breathe again, to walk through the penthouse without fear, to see the city lights not as a cage, but as freedom. The fall of Alex was complete. What remained was mine to rebuild. The city had settled into autumn by the time the dust cleared. Leaves gathered along the sidewalks, gold and rust against the concrete. The air held that crispness that makes you breathe deeper, as if to remind yourself you've survived another season. Inside the penthouse, silence no longer felt like a weight. It felt like peace. The golden key still rested in my pocket each day, but now it was less of a shield and more of a promise. A promise that I had fought, endured, and reclaimed what was mine. The newspapers had moved on to fresher scandals. The hashtags had slowed, though not disappeared. Every now and then, I would catch a stray mention online, someone recalling the penthouse scammer case or a meme that recycled Alex's drunken brag. The internet never truly forgets. But life does move forward. Evelyn came over often in those weeks. At first, it was practical reviewing paperwork, ensuring accounts were secured, finalizing the sanctions against Alex. But slowly it became something more. She brought coffee one morning, laughed at a memory we hadn't shared in years, and stayed longer than business required. We were finding our way back to each other. One evening, as we sat on the balcony overlooking the glittering city, I asked her the question that had been sitting in my chest since the verdict. "Do you think I did the right thing?" She looked at me, eyes sharp but softened by the glow of the city lights. "You didn't choose this fight, Olivia. It was forced on you. But yes, you did the right thing. You stood up when they tried to break you. That's all anyone can do. Her words stayed with me. For months I had been consumed by humiliation and fear. Now there was space for something else. Gratitude. Gratitude that betrayal had not been the end of me. Gratitude that family, though fractured, could still surprise you. Sometimes I still dream about that birthday night, the folder on the marble table, the laughter that cut sharper than knives. But when I wake, I see the city spread out before me, and I remember how the story ended. Not with surrender, not with silence, but with resilience. I know some will say revenge is ugly. Maybe they're right. But I also know that without it, truth often remains buried. Alex wanted me erased. Instead, their downfall became a warning for others. And my survival became my own quiet victory. So here I sit in a penthouse that is no longer just a monument to inheritance, but a testament to endurance. Betrayal may have started the story, but revenge gave it closure. And now I'll leave the question with you. If you think I was right to fight back, comment right. If you would have handled it differently, share your idea below. And tell me where you're watching from, because stories like these remind us all how fragile trust can be and how strong we must be when it breaks.